going to talk about how we navigate our systems. So navigation's not a new thing. From the annals of time, people have used stone circles, they've used sundials, they've used compasses to try and find their way. Often that depends on knowing a couple of fixed points, where the sun is, what direction you're facing, and that helps you to kind of make your way. Over time, this evolved into kind of paper maps. And strangely, these seem almost like historical items now. They're almost in the annals of time for us. And increasingly, we tend to navigate now only with a sense of where our destination is, not actually sometimes knowing the route that we're going to take. We may know the road ahead, we may know the next turn, but we're not actually seeing that whole map and that whole sense of context. And to what extent can we take our eyes off the road entirely? We've got driverless cars now coming in. You literally don't have to have any sense of where you're going or any kind of compass at hand. But this is and can be quite dangerous. How much do we actually need to think about where we are and where we're going? When we leave it all down to sort of automatic things, we lose some control over the process. And sometimes this can happen within systems. If we don't have a sense of what lies around us, how do we know we're getting to the right place? How do we find our way? So, do we know where we're going? Does the route we choose matter? How do we show others the way? And how we find our way will always change as the environment around us changes. So I'm going to talk a bit about the origins of maps, cartography, from the Greek kartes, the study and practice of making maps. When we build a map, we have to think really carefully about what's our purpose. What do we want to be able to show people? What do we want people to be able to understand? So, going back to our original premise, what do we want people to be able to navigate? Traditionally, maps have served very many purposes. So this map, for instance, is about showing borders. It's about showing identity and power. These maps, the kind of traditional OS maps, are all about showing things in our way, ups and downs, hills. This map, which was one of the most original maps of the kind of globe, was about how you might find your way around a multi-dimensional world. It was based on this understanding that we're not flat. It's not just the skyline ahead of us. So maps start to codify what's out there, what's in existence. So the Mercator projection is probably one of the most famous maps we have. It's the map that we associate with the world. And it was developed really for the purposes of navigation. So Gerardus Mercator, who developed it, flattened the globe into a 2D map so that people could navigate by straightening the meridian lines. Great for navigation, not so useful when it came for representing size and distance. So what you end up with, the map that we know, is in black and blue here, on top of it in green is the actual physical size of the different continents, the different countries. Now over time this map became incredibly commonplace. We still see it and versions of it today. And people now tend to assume that there was a kind of implicit desire to show the power of Europe and America, Western countries, and to almost make places like Africa and South America appear smaller. The intent has kind of been lost, so even though the intent was navigation, over time that intent becomes perceived as being about power. Another example of a map where you might question what its intent is. This is a very famous map. I think most of us can imagine the London Underground. But actually, the London Underground map isn't accurate. This London Underground map is a lot more accurate, but it's not navigable. So when you map and when you navigate, you're not always trying to do a perfect representation of what's out there. There's an intent behind it. And maps can increasingly be around capturing our collective knowledge. So this map was used in Kenya, and it's based on a technology tool called Ushahidi, which is the Swahili word for testimony. And it was developed to allow people to input their experiences into maps. So in this case, this is incidences of electoral violence in Kenya in around 2008. This is a very interesting example because it shows how often knowledge in terms of building maps has come from the top down, one person building something that everybody else uses. But increasingly now, we know that knowledge is all around us and may come from anybody. So sometimes maps are actually just a way of making us think, to make a point. And this map is about showing how many fish there were in the sea back in 1900 and how many there are now in 2000. And the visual impact of it strikes us straight away. So what can maps teach us? What can navigation teach us about system change? Well, normally you start from a point you know. You start from your own experience as a frontline worker or as anyone in the system. What do you know? What's around you? What can you explore and observe from that point that you own, your individual experience? And starting from there, you can start to uncover and observe and document different fixed points and build up a picture of what's around you. But what I think it's important to keep in mind when you do that is, if you're mapping, what's the purpose of your map? What are you trying to show people? Can you question the intent behind your system? So if you work in homelessness, what was the original intent behind the service that you work within? And once you start to go into system intent, you can then start to actually look at whether things are really delivering upon that intent, rather than just being caught in seeing the everyday workings, the everyday route. You can actually go back to what was the purpose of this. And those are skills, I think, that just help you see your system differently. So keep in mind the skills of a cartographer. Going out, exploring, observing, documenting, being prepared to be a bit precarious and actually leap into the unknown and experience and see it, but from that starting point that you know.